Hello, everybody. We are back with the most listened to political podcast show on the Evansville Podcast Network.
Period.
This is Justin Groenert with my colleague and cohort in crime,
Matthew Neville.
And we are in the Trump world, are we not?
It's been interesting.
We are just about, 3 weeks in? 2 weeks in?
2 weeks.
We are a full 2 weeks in, everybody. And what can I say but wow. In fact, it's 2 weeks today.
2 weeks today.
And wow. It feels like it's been 6 months already.
There's been a lot happening, a lot of strange, not normal things happening.
At what point does anybody on the White House team explain to Donald Trump that he has 4 years to get this stuff done? Because I feel like he's just ticking off campaign promises through executive order, no less, which is a whole other issue, in about 2 weeks' time. I feel like this is like a race to get out of the White House. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe he's just going to tick off his stuff and say,
I did it. I'm out. I've made my promises. I made it happen.
46 is on his way.
I made it great again. It's been a good 3 weeks. I'm out. He just leaves.
I don't think that's going to happen. But man, it has been an interesting ride. Did we talk the last time about the idea that this is the first time since in recent history that no member of the senior staff at the White House has had any White House experience at all?
I don't think we discussed that.
Well, it's true. There's nobody on the senior staff that has any White House experience, and I hate to say it, but it's showing.
Yeah, it's showing
blatantly. Man. And, you know, the media is doing themselves no favors either. I think they've not figured out that Donald Trump throws all kinds of firebombs just to confuse the media as to what he's really trying to do.
And it works.
I think the guy's a genius in a weird way. I think he thrives on chaos. I think his White House, 2 weeks in, what we're already seeing is somewhat in chaos. And at the end of the day, the media takes the bait every time.
Well, you gotta remember, I'm not here to defend the media, obviously, because I don't really care. But
I'm not here to defend Donald Trump, quite frankly, but, you know.
The media is going to go with whatever's just going to get more ratings. I think,
right.
and you would certainly agree, we've gotten past the point where the news media exists to inform the public. The news media is there to get ratings for ad buy.
I agree. I agree that the media is not there for the ability to inform anyone. And if you've gone on anybody's Facebook page in the last 3 weeks, we are in a uber meltdown of epic proportions as a society, I've convinced. At what point do we pull ourselves out of this shock and awe malaise and get back to some sense of normalcy? Or do we?
I don't know if we do. I think, as scary it is to think, I think Donald Trump has shown a way of winning an election, especially, with the way he did, came from behind, essentially. Not a whole lot of substance, more of flash, which is a hell of a lot easier to do.
But how much of that is exclusive to Donald Trump? I don't see this list of people that have the backstory and the sort of front of mind in popular culture status that Donald Trump had that can walk in and win an election like that. I think ultimately what he does is he sets people up to try it, and it's going to fail miserably next time.
Yeah,
we talked about it a little bit.
How many of them kind of try to jump on the throwing bombs everywhere, throwing in chaos,
right.
And it's not really going to work for.
It's not going to work for anybody else.
Donald Trump,
right? I think this is a weird one-off.
Let's hope
in the annals of certainly I hope, but I think it's a weird sort of. He is his own animal, and I think you saw it a little bit in the primary when Republicans were trying to catch Donald Trump, and they start throwing haymakers, and Marco Rubio tried it once and it burned him badly.
Poor Marco.
Jeb tried. Jeb was the one that was sort of the only guy that would go after Donald for a long time.
That was very commendable of him. He was one of the few that was willing to stand up there and actually try to go toe to toe with him.
Right. And it didn't work for him either. No. But then again, it was out of his it was not his MO.
Not his personality. It's just how he is.
He had to draw himself out of that to get there, and it didn't work. And I don't see anybody on the Democratic side that's going to be able to pull that off either.
No. Unless Kanye West does in fact run in 2020. Then again, he did meet with Trump and take a picture with him, so he may be on that Republican ticket.
True.
I don't know.
That's true. So, this has been everything I think that we thought it would be. I think Trump is acting exactly like most people thought he would. He's not gonna be your atypical president.
No, he's not going to be in the mold of anybody else. And anybody that was expecting him to be was grossly underestimating what Donald Trump was going to be doing. If you look at what the campaign was, that was not your typical normal campaign. And you certainly can't think as president he's going to be any different.
I will say this, somewhat to his credit, whether you like his policies or not, he is ticking off the list of everything he has said he was going to do. He is ticking them off left, right, and sideways. Now, granted, he's doing it by executive order, which I find hysterical that Republicans are not freaking out yet.
I wanted to bring that up because it's interesting to me.
We spent 8 years drilling Barack Obama for doing the same thing. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to change quickly. I think the more, whether you like the ban or not, I mean, really all it is a 90-day pause on immigrants from 5 countries and refugees. But when candidate Trump calls it a Muslim ban to garner votes, and you play semantics with the verbiage, guess what? Perception becomes reality.
Yeah.
If you read the actual executive order, it's a 90-day or 120-day ban while they work through the system to figure out how to strengthen the system. I don't think anybody's really going to argue with that. But the problem is, again, words matter. And perception becomes reality very quickly. And the rollout was a completely ill thought out disaster.
Yeah.
And now we have protests in airports. We have just outrage everywhere. And to some extent, it's probably fair. Trump brought it on himself. Their team brought it on themselves. So if he's going to be successful, he's going to have to figure out that, again, as the president of the United States, words matter.
I'm curious to see with we've talked a little bit about his senior staff really having no experience, and I mean there's going to be growing pains. There is in every administration, every presidency has kind of little things that happen. I'm curious to see whether or not A, they're going to learn from these, and B, if they're viewing the rollout as bad at all. If they're thinking this is what we wanted, and if this is going to be for 4 years, or if they're still kind of in that learning curve of, oh, this is how it worked. We have to talk to Homeland Security before we do things like this.
Well, and part of the deal here is that, well, there are two things, and we'll get to the cabinet part second. One, I think they are. Most of the news reports coming out of the White House say
there's a lot of them. There is a lot of leaking coming from this White House.
Well, and that's another point. Let me make my first point, then we'll hit that, then we'll hit the cabinet. For starters, Reince Priebus understood that was a fiasco, and he is going to grab the reins to rein that in. And you've seen him pull a couple of executive orders. There was a cybersecurity one. There was the rumor of the LBGT one that hasn't happened. Where they have just pulled them off. Oh, the voter fraud one disappeared all of a sudden. They realized at that point you have to get the communications plan right first, and then you go pull the executive order. This knee jerk Johnny on the spot. We're going to do this right now. Does not fly. No. It doesn't work. And I think the cooler heads in the White House have figured that out, and they have somewhat mollified that process. Now, again, I hope they're sort of towards the end of that, of the executive order reign, and that Congress can actually get some things done and, get back to somewhat of a normal order. But yeah, that's a problem. So the cabinet, part of the other problem to your point about the cabinet was very simply that he doesn't have his cabinet in. I mean, he doesn't have, as of yesterday or 2 days ago, he got a Secretary of State, right?
Right. Homeland
Security had been done. CIA had been done. We're still fighting through cabinet selections. Now, granted, whether Steve Bannon decided to let Donald Trump tell them is a completely separate issue. And Steve Bannon is everything that everyone with the worst intentions thought he is. He is by all measures 3/4 of the problem.
Yeah.
And he is exerting his authority everywhere, which is going to be a problem. But they're going to have to get the cabinet done. They've got to get some of these cooler heads in the room to make some of these decisions to help slow this process down. And God, I hope in 2 weeks or a month we can say that things have settled down and things are a little more normal. Because right now, going on 14 days of his administration, he's had one good day, and that's about it.
I'm trying to think of what day was the good day.
The Supreme Court nomination. That was a pretty solid day all around for him.
Can we talk about the almost Apprentice Style way he tried to do that? With creating Twitter accounts for both people to hype up the event of getting the guy who wasn't going to be picked to pretend like he was driving to D.C. for it as well. Can we talk about just the showbiz of it? Because to me, that was just...
Again, what do you expect out of Donald Trump? What do you expect out of him? The guy is a reality TV guy. Of course he's going to make it ratings.
A reality TV guy.
You really did. If more of your people that are out protesting and throwing haymakers at Cal Berkeley and burning cars in D.C. would have shown up and voted, we may not have been in this spot.
And there's only like 30 of those people total.
I know. It's pretty funny how that works. But seriously, like, there is... what's the harm? Really? I mean, it gets people watching.
I was curious about it. I was checking Twitter the entire time waiting for the name to leak. And that's one thing I will say. There were a lot of reports of who it was going to be. There's almost always 20, 30 minutes before. We've learned that it's going to be this person. I was on Twitter for the half hour before. Nowhere to be found. Yeah. Why can they keep that locked up, but they can't keep any of this other stuff locked up?
Well, because everyone was in agreement on who that was, so they gave him his moment, I would guess.
That's true.
So let's talk about the SCOTUS pick. Gorsuch seems to be a pretty solid pick for the court. I don't think he's out too far of the mainstream, really. I mean, he's a conservative, certainly. What are your thoughts? I mean,
Donald Trump could have picked a lot worse. I mean, he could have picked, a Harriet Miers type of candidate that was had no judicial experience whatsoever, that was someone that was more of a friend and a colleague to him rather than someone with a good judicial experience. And I will commend Donald Trump for, even in the campaign, when he put out his list of people, there were legitimate names on there, people who have a good judicial record.
Sure. I like the pick. I think it's solid. I get the Democrats are upset that, they're going to go through the process. But this is the problem with Washington right now. And the Republicans are dealing with this with the executive order thing, where we spent 6 years screaming about Barack Obama usurping Congress's authority and using the executive order to legislate. Now we have Democrats that are screaming, we got to have 9 justices. The Supreme Court's broken. We got to have 9 justices. You guys are all evil. When you're 10 months away from an election, when that seat opens up. Now we've had an election, and now there's this indignant outrage that it's a stolen seat, and the Republicans are never going to get their nominee, in spite of the fact that in 2006, when he was put on the bench, everybody voted for him. Nobody put up a no vote, so it's all recorded as a yes. Sorry, I hate to tell you this, but Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton all put him on the bench on the 10th Circuit of Appeals. It happened. There's a vote there. You can claim they didn't, but if they had a
parsing
problem,
a little bit, but
I'm not. A voice vote is basically recorded as a 100-0 vote, correct? And if he was so egregious, one of those 4, with presidential ambition no less, would have said something. So you can sit there and say they didn't technically vote for him. He got on the bench unanimously by a voice vote. So they obviously signed off and approved somewhere. Right?
Or they didn't know what was going on at that moment.
Stop it. Stop it. So here's my concern. You pose this question of how much does this work for the Democrats? I don't think it does. And I'll tell you why. If you look at what's coming in 2018, the Senate map is atrocious for the Democrats. And it's atrocious in places like the Midwest, where they did not do well this presidential cycle. So even if Donald Trump is a somewhat mitigated disaster, the Republican base that put him in the White House is going to be pretty happy, right? We can all say that he's ticking off the list of things that he said he's going to do.
So far.
And the outrage thus far are the liberals on the East Coast and the West Coast that are all freaking out, right? Generally speaking.
For the most part.
I mean, maybe Chicago and some of the bigger urban centers in the Midwest, but for the most part, middle America is not all that outraged right now. I don't
Especially not the Donald Trump supporters.
Right, which all came from mainly the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
So you have a scenario here where you have and they're doing it with cabinet selections too. And the irony here is that if Harry Reid hadn't pulled the semi-nuclear option, Betsy DeVos isn't going to be the next Secretary of Education, which she will be. You actually might have a chance to stop Rex Tillerson. You have a chance to stop some of these cabinet appointments. And Harry Reid did it to himself. So you have that. You have your own selves to blame for that.
Yeah.
I hope.
And when Mitch McConnell pulls the full nuclear to get the Supreme Court justice,
I don't think he will.
In a couple of years,
I really don't think he will. I don't think they'll come up with a deal. I think there's too much on the line for both of them to fully strip the filibuster out of all of it. And as much as Chuck Schumer wants to fly the flag, McConnell has way too much reverence for the Senate, I think, to go nuclear. I think he is a shrewd politician. I think he is a shrewd negotiator. I think they'll strike a deal somewhere to get to 60 on Gorsuch. I think, like I said, if you were a year out, it's one thing. But what are the Democrats gonna filibuster for 4 years and keep the court at 8 justices for 4 years?
Republicans have told us that 8 is enough.
What do you mean? When did the Republicans ever filibuster anybody for 8 years or 4 years?
No, that 8 justices is enough.
Oh, well, that's fine, but
and you didn't get my 80s TV show reference.
I did not.
I was
sorry.
God, come on.
As the old man of this podcast,
you should really be catching my 8 is enough references. I mean, I'm as a general rule, I'm not a big fan of the filibuster. I get the concept of it. I get kind of the reason that it's there. I think it's over the years it's been extremely heavily overused.
Right. And I think that's the general breakdown of the system in general.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think, and it started with Robert Bork, quite frankly. I mean, up until that point, litmus tests were never put into place. It was, are they capable and qualified to read the Constitution and to judiciously rule to uphold it?
Right.
That was it. That was the litmus test. Are you competent? Are you qualified? And can you do the job? That was it. Then Robert Bork happened, and Ted Kennedy went on his crusade on the life issue, and went down a rabbit hole that we really have never come back from. I think you add the 24-hour news cycle, you add social media, you add bad media or fake news or alternative facts or whatever slang you want to use for the state of the media and the state of our political ecosystem, and you get a general breakdown in and of itself. So, long story short, I think Gorsuch is going on the court. I think he's going to get enough votes. I think there are enough squishy Democrats that are in tight seats that want to keep their jobs that filibustering for 2 years is not going to work. Manchin has already said he's willing to listen. People like Claire McCaskill in Missouri are going to be in a tough spot. Joe Donnelly in Indiana is going to be in a tough spot. I think you'll get to 60 ultimately. McConnell will strike a deal somewhere. They'll cut a deal and get enough votes in line to probably put him on the bench. But it's going to be a tough fight. They're not going to just hand over the seat. And quite frankly, I don't think they should.
No.
But this idea that you're going to just, this Merkley idea that it's a stolen seat and we're never going to put anybody on the bench is just, it's not going to work the way that it worked for the Republicans. I don't think.
You can't hold on a seat for years. It's just not how it works. I mean,
right.
You can do it for 11 months. That's obviously been proven, but I mean, you can't really do it for...
But again, that was we're in a presidential election cycle. And I get it. I didn't necessarily agree with it then. But again, there was a finite date. If Hillary Clinton was president, the Republicans have nothing to say, but, they're not going to filibuster the next one. They could try, but they would blow up in their face if they did. And I think the Democrats, yelled and screamed, but really didn't yell and scream because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to get the seat and they were going to get somebody even better than Merrick Garland, quite frankly. And I'm not 100% convinced that if Hillary Clinton had won, that Merrick Garland doesn't go on the court just to keep her from nominating somebody worse, quite frankly. So I'm not validating the Republicans' play there. It was a gamble. It worked, but but at the same time, if you know you're not going to confirm the guy, why give him a hearing? Why put him through that if you're not going to confirm him?
Why not just give him a vote?
Well, that's fine. You vote him down and you embarrass him basically, and you ruin a really good career essentially by doing that. So in a way, it's almost more humane that the Republicans just said, we're not going to do this.
I think it was more they didn't want to give him a hearing because how are you going to say that he shouldn't be on the court?
The same way you said he wasn't going to be on the court. That's why they didn't do it.
No, but I'm saying if you have the 2-day hearing,
there wasn't a Republican that said he wasn't qualified. There wasn't a Republican that said he wouldn't make a decent justice. They disagreed on him on policy.
Right.
There wasn't one really that said, I mean, he wouldn't have gotten every vote. Obviously, there are enough philosophical differences where but by any measure, Merrick Garland's qualified for the court. I don't think anybody was making that argument. The argument was, we're already in a presidential cycle. We're going to let the election happen, and then we're going to let the court be decided. This is a different animal. But again, we'll see what happens. I think though, Donald Trump made a solid pick. I think if you're taking Scalia's seat, you found the perfect guy to do it.
He found a young judicial conservative. I mean, I think it's very similar to the Clarence Thomas pick, where he found a very young person that can sit in that seat for 25, 30 years.
Let's just hope that Gorsuch is...
he actually speaks.
Well, not only that he speaks, but he doesn't have quite the speed bumps that Clarence Thomas had.
Let's, for the sake of everyone, let's hope not. But
all right, so what do you want to talk about now?
One thing on Twitter, Michael Okuda wrote that Trump shouldn't get to appoint a justice in the final year of his presidency.
Ooh, I see what he did there. Oh, I see what he did there. That's
well done, sir. Well done.
Want to talk about that wall?
Man,
that wall.
Do we really? Is anybody surprised by this? Like, what? I don't understand where all this outrage is. When Donald Trump has said it from day one. All this is an example of a man doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's nothing that Barack Obama didn't sign off on as a senator. All he's doing is putting into law a law that Congress already passed. He's just making sure it happens. Like this is not East and West Berlin here. Like it's not. But alas, let the outrage continue.
Do you think there wasn't going to be outrage?
I think we are so past like real outrage that it doesn't matter what Hillary Clinton had done. The right would have just been outraged for the sake of being outraged. I think liberals right now are all pissed off and still bitter about losing, that they're going to be outraged no matter what Donald Trump does. There is this faux hysteria out there that takes everything and amplifies it by 1,000. You can go on your Facebook page right now and see that we have jumped the shark as a country all over the place. Would you at least somewhat agree with that sentiment?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be some outrage. I'm not saying Donald Trump is completely right and this is all made up. But I think the ripple effects of all of this, where there is just mass hysteria in a lot of cases that doesn't necessarily need to be there, is not good for anybody, certainly.
It's been a long time building.
You're right.
We saw this under Obama, and I'm sure you're not going to deny it, you're not going to justify it, but it's just it's the way that everything's gone. I mean,
so I guess my question is this: how do we pull ourselves back from the brink? How do we add some level of sanity back to the discourse? Like which side blinks?
You don't.
Oh, that's a really scary proposition.
I mean, how are we going to get back to 1960, Nixon and Kennedy up there talking about issues, and then it's without with the 24-hour news, that you're always going to have this faux outrage, because the outrage is what's going to get the ratings. It's what's going to get the eyeballs on the TV. Nobody wants to watch Chuck Schumer for 2 hours talking about policy. As much as I love Chuck Schumer, I don't even want to watch that. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Chuck Schumer. But that's not what people want to hear. They want to see the entertainment. They want to see the drama, and that's precisely what Donald Trump gave them.
I guess
it's been building.
But I mean, and granted, this White House hasn't helped. Our boy here wakes me up at 2 a.m. with a bevy of instant messages on Facebook.
In my defense, it was not 2 a.m. It was like midnight, and I had been
I was having some
I was having some fun that day.
You were, because I didn't know what was happening, and it was very frightening at 2 a.m.
We're talking about the Bowling Green Massacre.
Now, here's my problem with all of this. Here's my problem. A, the Bowling Green thing happened. It was not a massacre. Nobody died.
There was no actual event. There
were 2 Iraqi immigrants that were plotting a terrorist attack in Bowling Green. One of them is serving life in prison. So
I mean, it was a thing. As an event, I mean, there was no actual attack.
And this goes no. There was a plan to attack.
Sure.
And this is where words matter. And this is what drives me crazy. We literally have a scenario where the Trump administration can say, this is exactly why we are pausing immigration from these 5 countries. And this is a prime example why. Right? We had 2 Iraqi immigrants that were plotting against the United States. It's a perfect example to tell the story of why this I don't want to call it a ban because it's really not, but Donald Trump said it and whatever. And then they go and call it a massacre, and she gets the facts wrong, and it's like, what are you doing? This is not rocket science.
No.
Nobody died in Bowling Green, people. This is not a massacre.
No, there was,
and yet the media again is going to focus on the misplaced word and freak out as opposed to what they're trying to say. And I guess that's their right. They can, and I don't think that the Trump administration is throwing the media any bones, as we've seen with Sean Spicer and the man with the worst job in Washington.
I feel bad for him. It takes a lot to make me feel bad for a Trump administration official. But you can tell, especially that first day when he had to go out there and talk about how this was the most attended inauguration period. You could tell that was a guy who was told, you're going to go say this, and I'm going to sit here and watch you do it.
Yep. Yeah.
I felt bad for him.
I still feel bad for Sean Spicer. Yeah,
the Bowling Green.
But this is the amateur hour stuff that drives me crazy. You know, like we have serious policy issues to discuss, and somebody blows it up using a completely inappropriate word to intimate a completely fictitious event. And now we're talking about semantics as opposed to the policy in place anyway. Which, granted, whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. We still should be having the right conversation. And I think we're not having the right conversation in this country at all. And Donald Trump is feeding into that by, as I said earlier, a friend of mine described it as he just throws Molotov cocktails. He just throws fire everywhere and lets the squirrels run. And nobody knows what to cover or how to cover it. So he has some sense of control in a weird way in all the chaos because he's controlling the chaos. It's really, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. I said, maybe we shaking up the White House and sort of how we do politics would be good. I'm not sure this is what I was referring to.
Much like when I was saying Pence must go. Specificity is very important.
I was going to say he went to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
You got to be very specific on what you're looking for.
Yeah, no joke. So anyway, that runs down a lot of what we've been talking about. Have you watched Batman yet, by the way?
I've been busy with other things.
Oh, God.
I have a Batman thing, if we're okay.
Please.
So it keeps coming up. Have you heard the Mark Hamill reads the tweets of Donald Trump as the Joker because he was the voice of the Joker on the animated series?
No.
It's amazing.
Is it?
Yeah, I'll pull some up for you.
Yeah, we need to do that. Can we put that on the Facebook page?
The woman that did the voice of Harley Quinn started reading Kellyanne Conway's.
That could be fun.
So Batman keeps coming up.
I'm telling you, Batman is really a way of life. Let's be real. Seriously, get on it.
It's on my to-do list.
Your to-do list needs to move faster. This is insane.
Do you want to talk about the inauguration? You were there. You want to talk about?
I was not at the actual inauguration.
You were in D.C. for the inauguration.
I was in Washington, D.C. for some of the inaugural festivities. It was unlike anything I've ever been through before. I had been to 2 inaugurations previously. This one was surreal in so many ways. Between Indiana's governor becoming the vice president of the United States, seeing he and Dan Quayle on the same stage the night before the election was really kind of cool. I'm not going to lie. Mike Pence's sort of farewell address to his fellow Hoosiers in the room was pretty touching. He choked up a little bit. I thought it was very cool to be in the room. I'll say that much. Whether you like Mike Pence or not, it was a pretty cool place to be. It was the smallest of the balls. I think there were only 1,000 tickets. It was the hottest ticket in D.C. A lot of people that I see around the State House were there. A lot of state legislators were there. Most of the delegation, if not all of the delegation, was there. So it was a really cool event. They did a really nice job with it. Hat tip to the Indiana Society of Washington for pulling that off. I don't think when they started planning, they saw the next vice president of the United States being in the room. But so kudos to those guys. It was a really cool event. Inauguration day, just kind of hung out, laid low. I was staying out in Bethesda, so I didn't even go into the city until much later. Did attempt to go to one of the 3 sanctioned balls, and the 2.5 mile line to get in sort of thwarted that effort. So we ended up, just a bunch of us went to dinner and kind of did our own thing. But again, the protests were insane. Walking, we couldn't get close in an Uber to the event, and had to walk through a lot of debris from the previous unrest in part of DC. It was a little surreal. There were a lot of fully armed police officers and stuff, but all in all, the night by that time, most of the firebombing and whatever else went down, broken windows and stuff had been halted, and it wasn't too bad. But again, it was really surreal. Again, sort of this focus on how many people were there, and seemed a little silly.
It is silly.
Well, it just shows you how thin-skinned Donald Trump really is.
It's just,
look,
it's his ego. And that's all that it is, his ego.
Look, I don't care who came before. No one is going to top Barack Obama's first inauguration. Like, that was a historic moment
that was
in this country.
A cultural, historical moment.
Right. You're not going to top that. Like, I don't care how many pictures you take. There are very few people that are going to come after Barack Obama that are going to beat that number.
Right. That shouldn't be your goal.
Right. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't matter. Guess what? You're the president of the United States. You're the most powerful man in the free world. Who cares? And so that was a little ridiculous. I'm not going to lie. And then you had the Women's March the next day. So that added to the numbers and the intrigue a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty cool. Whether you like it or not, you saw millions of people from around the country gather to express their thoughts, their concerns, in what turned out to be a very peaceful display of protest. I didn't see any problem with it. I thought it was very encouraging, actually. I knew a lot of people that were there that went out to D.C. So there are ways to do it. They showed how to do it. The protesters on Inauguration Day showed how not to do it. And I don't necessarily think that... I think the protests are encouraging in a lot of ways, because it's getting people invested in the process again that we haven't had in a long time. So while I don't necessarily agree with all of the premises of protesting around the country, I certainly appreciate that they are, and that they're willing to let their voice be heard, so long as it's in a peaceful and productive manner. Talk about that a little bit. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting to see everyone kind of get mobilized, get energized. As someone who's a member of the party that's out of power, it's good to see people starting to kind of get mobilized. As we kind of touched on, part of it is kind of the hysteria drawn by the media, and so not necessarily all of them are going to really have a full grasp of what is going on or really understand the actual items that are happening. I think it's good that the vast majority of them are peaceful. Mm-hmm. They're not going out there and doing shenanigans things. It's people out there expressing their views. Right. And I'm curious to see, I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep this up. I don't know if it's occurred to me that it's entirely possible that every single thing that Donald Trump has done in this entire time was part of a Steve Bannon, Reince Priebus plan of just...
First of all, don't put Bannon and Priebus together like they're like Abbott and Costello plotting together. I don't think
I would watch
two,
that buddy comedy.
I think those two are not on the same polar end of the magnet at all. I think those two were put into place to butt heads. I think it goes back to that chaos theory. You can't tell me that Steve Bannon is excited to be working with the chairman of the Republican Party in any way. I mean, it's absolutely the establishment versus the anti-establishment, basically 1 and 1A in the White House. So just throwing that out there.
I mean, more of, is it possible that, as you said, all of these Molotov cocktails that are be throwing, is it part of a more concerted strategy for there to be chaos so that some of the things that they do get a little less coverage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely the plan. And I think that's part of
or
the
is it chaos because
genius.
they don't really fully have a grasp of what they're doing?
I honestly think it's both. I think the chaos that can be controlled is absolutely being pushed. I think Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing when he gets on Twitter. I think he absolutely knows. Now, when you have a scenario where a rollout to an executive order gets away from you, I don't think they planned that. I don't think that chaos necessarily was planned. I think that was a botched misstep by the administration that could have made things a lot easier on themselves and didn't. So I think it's a mixture of both. But I do think in the grand scheme of things, you're exactly right. Chaos theory to divert attention, I think it's absolutely his MO. Absolutely. And I think you're going to have it for the next 4 years, quite frankly.
Assuming that Trump's here for 4 years.
Let's just assume that he is until he isn't. I think it's fair to give him his full 4 years at this point. But to your point, it is going to be tough to sustain it because, again, there's so many things that people can get up in arms about.
There's only so much energy that people are going to have for this before they finally just say, I'm turning the TV off and I'm not watching anymore. And I'm concerned of when we get to that point, because is it going to be in a month? Is it going to be, September of 2018, and these people who are outraged by Trump suddenly decide, you know what, to hell with politics, I'm done watching this, and they stay home.
And
that's my concern.
And I'm going to guess that's half of his strategy, is to be just so over the... Now, granted, I think right now he's trying to figure out where that line is, and he's going to tow it as far as he can tow it and then work his way back.
Because Bannon's going to push that line.
Yeah,
he's going to push him over the line almost every time, because that's what Bannon does.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But I think at some point, especially once we get back into some semblance of regular order, when Congress is actually passing legislation,
the cabinet is done,
right, and we can get away from some of the executive order stuff. I think that will be when we can rein it back a little bit. But who knows? And to your point, you're exactly right. I think the whole strategy right now is to get all of the outrage out as much as possible right now, and hope to God it peters out before 2018.
See, I'm not convinced that they're thinking that long term.
Oh, I think they are. I think they absolutely are. When is normally the worst midterm for a president?
Right after they're elected.
Exactly. I think there are guys in that White House that absolutely know that 2018 is the deal now.
But that is the riskiest strategy ever, though, to continually have chaos. You're either going to have a bunch of wins, or you're going to get your ass kicked. Those are your two options. I completely
agree with you. But you know what?
So risky.
It has worked for Donald Trump from the word go. It has worked every step of the way. The guy shouldn't be president. The guy shouldn't have been the Republican nominee, for God's sake. And it worked. He started nicknaming presidential candidates and distracting from the fact that he wasn't saying anything. He turned it into what size his hand was the biggest debate we had. And now he's sitting in the White House. Everybody counted him out against Hillary Clinton. Hell, you and I both did.
Yeah.
And he's sitting in the White House. I think it absolutely is a strategy. This is where, again, Donald Trump's going to be able to get away with things other people can't. So to your point, you're right. I think it's either going to he's either going to hit the jackpot or he's going to go bankrupt in terms of political capital, not in real life.
He's done both of those several times, but
it's true. Hey-oh, he did just air rim shot just for those of you that aren't in the room. So we'll see what happens. But
it's risky.
Well, but he does have the map that's going to help him out
in the Senate.
The Senate, and again, I think the House is not going to flip anytime soon. It's going to get tighter.
I don't think it's that badly gerrymandered. I mean, it's doable. I am concerned that, there seems to be a lot of these times where the Democratic House candidates are getting more total votes nationwide than the Republican House candidates and still not getting close to a majority. But what are you going to do?
Exactly.
That's gerrymandering for you.
It is. God bless it.
It's unfortunate. It really is. Even when it's in our favor, I'm still a fan of better drawing these districts, because you see some of these districts that are just so ridiculously drawn. They look like little salamanders and animals and stuff, that they're just so ridiculously drawn. But how do you fix it? That's what I've always come back to. How do you fix it? Because eventually you have to have somebody that breaks the tie. If you're going to have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, somebody has to break the tie.
Well, and again, I think that goes back to the larger issue of we're not going to be able to fix the system until we make November's matter again.
Make November's great again.
Make November great again. That is exactly right, Matt. I'm going to give you that one. Because at the end of the day, we're fighting with the extremes of each party. Really, most of the competitive races anymore are in the primary in a lot of these house races.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, once you have beaten back your own party and you're forced to move to the extremes of either side of the spectrum as a Republican or a Democrat, there's no compromise in that. So, that I've always said is much bigger a threat to democracy than money.
I don't know. I'm curious to see. Third parties are always clamoring, and I thought there was the judicial decision about the Presidential Debate Commission essentially saying that they were favoring Democrats and Republicans. It was filed by the Libertarians. I'm curious to see what that's going to do in 4 years. I don't know if the Libertarians are ever going to kind of, get their act together to actually have the semblance of a legitimate third option.
Well, I don't think that you need a third option necessarily. I think if you can fix the two option system and make November's matter, then it sort of solves itself.
I just don't know how you do that, though.
It's really simple. You outlaw gerrymandering, and you basically put a spot in the middle of the district, and you put a circle around it that puts 170,000 people in it, or whatever the number is, and there you go. You don't have these weird, lines, essentially the width of a street, that runs 37 miles away from the district, takes a left-hand turn, and then takes another 5,000 people from a county that's 3.5 hours away from the district. That's how you do it. You do it geographically. I'll give Todd Rokita credit. As Secretary of State, he tried to do that, and it didn't go anywhere. In Indiana, I think there's a new push now. I think Jerry Torr has a bill that is looking at how we write our congressional and state legislature maps. I think it needs to be looked at in a whole lot of states, quite frankly, because I think that in and of itself helps the problem of this sort of pushing to the extremes. So,
because competitive races, especially in November, and your point is definitely correct. When you have those competitive races in November, you're actually having those two competing argument conversations.
It allows compromise.
And not far and farther.
Right. It allows compromise.
Yeah.
You now have to move to the middle as opposed to moving to the polar extremes. So this is something I've done a little research on for grad school. And I think that it really, if we're going to walk ourselves back from the brink, like we were talking about earlier, that's how we're going to do it.
It's where it starts.
Yeah. So anyway, what else you want to talk about?
I don't know. I think we're going to have, Trump's going to give us material for
that's true. We might have 4
years.
Ourselves.
There's only so much outrage I can have at any given time.
Well, and like I said, we're going to work to have some more guests on too. We've got a short list we're working on right now. So hopefully you'll have some more guests like Abdul coming up soon. We're getting some good feedback from social media on the podcast. I've had a couple of people reach out and tell me that they enjoy my wiping the floor with Matthew during the podcast. So that's always fun.
It's unfortunate that they need to actually turn the volume up if that's...
It may or may not have cost me $5 and a compliment, but, it's fine.
That's pretty cheap for a compliment, man.
That's right. Hey, I do what I can. But anyway, we will be back here soon. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. We appreciate it. We will be back soon. Again, Justin Groenert.
Matthew Neville. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening.